many parents will no doubt be delighted at the prospect of children going back to school after this really long break. But for many other parents, I know that in reality, rather than a relief, the words back to school conjure up some real sense of anxiety. Because for many, the job of parenting their children through the school process is of trying to hammer a square peg into a round hole, a whole of an education system that was really not designed with their particular type of child in mind. And that can be for a variety of reasons. Perhaps your child is neurodiverse. They learn differently. They may be absolutely brilliant and highly intelligent, but some of the social demands of school may be really difficult for them. Perhaps a child, when asked to do something as simple as line up girls and boys in separate lines or use male and female toilets, finds themselves completely othered because they identify as non-binary or a trans. Perhaps some children are at much higher risk of exclusion from school, and not only that, find that they can't see themselves reflected in the teacher population, that unconscious bias and microaggressions are part of the ordinary experience of everyday school life. Perhaps the curriculum doesn't reflect the sexuality of that child or young person or their parents, and so they feel excluded and marginalised. Perhaps a child experiences bullying or such high anxiety that school is not a safe place for them. So I suppose my role as an education lawyer is very much about squaring the circle, about looking at ways adjustments can be made, about looking at additional support and provision that can be made for a child so that they can fully access their current school curriculum, or sometimes so that they can move to a school that's more suited to them, perhaps with a lower arousal environment, perhaps with a smaller class size, perhaps where there are other children with whom they can identify. So squaring the circle is an acknowledgement of the fact that if we all, us as parents and educators, are just simply hammering our square peg children into a round hole education system, the problem with that is not that it's hard work, but that in the process of doing so, we risk destroying the peg. And what do I mean by that? Well, I mean that child's self-esteem, that child's sense of self-efficacy as a learner, and ultimately as an adult, able to move forward in independent living. I mean that for many children, the difficulties they face will become really serious obstacles moving forward if they experience so much distress that they begin to internalize that. Mental health distress is a huge issue for our young pupil population, and that's likely to be even more so in the context of the recent pandemic. So it's important to think about the fact that whilst the law is not the obvious way to turn in the event that a child is failing to thrive at school, a child is struggling to learn, or has difficulty meeting the expectations of school, or is experiencing alienation or harm, it's important to recognise that everything that's happening in education is happening not just within a political landscape that's often challenging, but also within a sometimes complicated legal framework, and that there may well be a resolution that has a legal basis to it. So understanding a child's rights and entitlements is critically important. Understanding what obligations are owed to children in order to make sure that their needs are properly identified and then met is hugely important. So I'm very fortunate that I'm able to perform a professional role that is really closely aligned with my experiences of challenge, both as a child that was permanently excluded from school at the age of 11, and as a parent of 3 children, 2 of whom have had significant enough special educational needs to require an education, health and care plan, and that through achieving the right level of support have been able to thrive and make really significant progress, both academically and socially. So for those of you who are feeling anxious about the prospect of a return to school, it's important to bear in mind that the antidote to that is action. So having more information, knowing what the options are, and taking the steps towards, squaring that circle for your particular child and their experience is likely to not only alleviate some of that anxiety, but very often lead to far happier outcomes.